Every civilization has its defining moment, the instant when it stands on the brink of extinction and must choose, kneel or fight. Most take the easy path, but humanity is different. We are not the most powerful species in the universe. We do not wield the most advanced technology, nor do we command the largest empire. We are but wanderers among the stars, a fragile species from a pale blue on the edge of the galaxy. And that is why they thought we could be erased. The war between humanity and the Galactic Union has raged for over 30 years. They came like a storm, sweeping through our colonies, crushing our proud fleets and finally breaking Earth's defenses. They believed the war was over, that humanity would be nothing more than a forgotten footnote in the vast history of the cosmos. But they knew nothing about us. At the farthest edge of the battlefield, on a dead world where no one should have survived, the Last Battalion still stands. No reinforcements, no advanced weaponry, no hope of rescue, only courage, ingenuity, and the unshakable resolve to turn this forsaken land into an unbreakable fortress. They do not fight for victory. They fight to send a message to the entire universe. Humanity will never kneel. And as the darkness of the galaxy closes in, they will show the enemy something no civilization has ever dared, to face the wrath of those with nothing left to lose. This is not a story of heroes. This is the story of those who were left behind and how they made the entire universe tremble. The skies over Erebus 9 burned with streaks of fire as the Galactic Union returned. They did not come to recover bodies. They came to ensure that not a single soul remained alive. Heavy destroyers roared through the atmosphere, sweeping the planet's surface with plasma blasts hot enough to melt a city in seconds. No infantry, no special forces deployment, because they believed that no one could have survived. But those who were presumed long dead were waiting. Battalion 117, sentenced to oblivion, had not only survived, but had turned Erebus 9 into their fortress. Beneath the surface, they had dug hundreds of tunnels, fashioned weapons from the wreckage of fallen ships, and built stockpiles from the scraps left behind. They had no cutting-edge weapons, but they had time and ingenuity. They studied the planet's electromagnetic storms, harnessing them as a natural shield. They engineered underground traps that weaponized toxic gas pockets beneath the surface. They transformed caves into deadly kill zones, where intruders would be swallowed by darkness and fire. The Union believed a final sweep would be enough to wipe out any survivors. But when their cannons fell silent, when their scanners detected no resistance, they made their greatest mistake. They set foot on the ground. Union troops deployed to the very sites where Battalion 117 had once fallen. They thought they were walking onto a desolate battlefield. Instead, they had entered a labyrinth of death. Thermobaric mines crafted from scavenged power cores detonated, obliterating entire squads. Magnetic disruptors fried communication links, isolating units, leaving them cut off with no way to call for help. Snipers using not advanced energy rifles, but old, well-tuned ballistic weapons picked them off one by one. But the most terrifying thing was not the weapons. It was the way they fought. Union soldiers were used to enemies who cowered, who fled when the battle turned against them. But on Erebus 9, they faced shadows that knew no fear. Human warriors did not retreat. They charged headlong into battle, willing to die if it meant taking an enemy with them. The wounded did not scream for mercy. They laughed. They cursed. They dared their enemies to kill them faster. A Union lieutenant, after witnessing a human soldier strap a grenade to his chest and tackle one of his own men, stammered into his comms, "They're not living beings. They're monsters." But he was wrong. They weren't monsters. They were human. As drop ships exploded, as entire squads vanished into the darkness, the Union began to realize their mistake. Erebus 9 was no longer a prison. It was no longer a dumping ground for the abandoned. It had become human territory, and those who dared to step foot upon it would pay in blood. Union commanders panicked. They ordered a retreat, but it was too late. Distress calls were drowned out by explosions and screams. Orbital warships attempted to bombard the surface, but the survivors had dug too deep. A command center aboard the battleship Dawn of Order intercepted an incoming transmission from Erebus 9. They assumed it was a surrender, but when they decoded the message, they found only a single line. You may leave, but remember, this place will never belong to you. As the Union fleet withdrew, no one dared to speak of the battle. No one dared to report what had transpired on Erebus 9. They hadn't just lost a planet. They had lost the illusion that humanity could be broken. Years later, Union soldiers who survived the Erebus 9 campaign began to suffer from nightmares. They dreamed of human warriors grinning in the fire, their eyes burning with defiance, their voices echoing across the stars. We are still here. No one dared return to Erebus 9. No one spoke of the ones who had been left behind. But one day, another signal echoed through space. Not a distress call, not a surrender, but a declaration of war. Erebus 9 was no longer a grave. It had become the cradle of an undying wrath. There was no sunlight on Erebus 9, only thick, black clouds and electromagnetic storms that lashed across the planet's surface like colossal whips. There were no lush green fields, only jagged cliffs and deep, gaping fissures that led into an abyss of endless darkness. This was where Battalion 117 had been cast down to die. But they refused to die. At first, only a few dozen survived the crash landing. Their drop pods shattered, weapons and supplies lost or broken. No hope of rescue, no way to communicate with anyone. But instead of despairing, they acted. They quickly realized that Erebus 9 had one advantage: the terrain. Deep ravines, natural cave systems, and sheer rock formations created a perfect landscape for guerrilla warfare. They had no war machines, no fortified bunkers, but they had their minds in their hands. They dug tunnels. The surface was uninhabitable due to the deadly storms, so they expanded the cave systems, turning them into barracks, armories, and fortified shelters. They built an intricate network of tunnels wide enough for quick movement, but collapsible in case of pursuit. They built traps, deep pitfall spikes hidden beneath thin layers of rock, acid from the dead rivers redirected into key passageways, toxic gas, traps repurposed from damaged oxygen tanks. They knew they couldn't defeat the enemy in open battle, but they could make every inch of ground a nightmare. They used everything. Hull plates from the wreckage became shields and armor. Destroyed engine components were stripped and repurposed into crude but effective weapons. Ammunition was scarce, so they only fired when absolutely necessary. Everything else was done with traps, with knives, with anything that could kill. Erebus 9 was not a battlefield the enemy was prepared for. The Galactic Union's armies were used to overwhelming their foes with fleets and superior firepower. They had no experience fighting in darkness, in canyons where death could strike from any shadow. Battalion 117 exploited that weakness. They fought like ghosts. No direct engagements. No fixed front lines. They struck from the darkness, hit hard, and vanished before the enemy could react. A patrol squad could leave their base in the morning and never return. They sowed fear, They left enemy corpses butchered, blood painting the black sands of Erebus 9. They sent simple messages, carved into stone, etched onto the armor of fallen Union soldiers. We are still here. They turned the hunters into prey. The Union sent reinforcements to investigate the disappearances. At first, small teams, then entire battalions. But even when they came in force, even when they had superior numbers and firepower, they could never sleep soundly because they knew the Red Hand was always watching. There were no more orders from high command, no more ranks, no, more pristine uniforms. On Erebus 9, only one rule remained: survive at all costs. But that wasn't the only reason they fought. They no longer fought for flags or distant councils sitting safely light years away. They fought for themselves, for the comrades they had lost, for the honor of humanity. They knew they could die at any moment, but they also knew that if they did, they would take dozens, hundreds of enemies with them. The enemy called them desperate animals, but they didn't understand one thing: humanity never quits. With each passing day on Erebus 9, Battalion 117 did not weaken. They became stronger, sharper, more cunning. They did not die. They became the demons of this world. And soon, the entire galaxy would learn that Erebus 9 was not a graveyard for humanity. It was the battlefield where humanity was reborn. When the colossal warships of the Alliance appeared in orbit over Erebus 9, their massive shadows swallowed the sky. Below, the human warriors watched their enemies, those who once believed humanity was nothing more than the walking dead, waiting to be wiped out. But if the Alliance ever thought this battle would be easy, they had made a fatal mistake. The survivors of Battalion 117, now known as the Red Hand, were not desperate men. They were the predators lurking in the darkness, the nightmares that made even the most elite Alliance forces tremble. And when the fleet of destruction began its descent, they no longer fought for survival, they fought for vengeance. When the Alliance decided to exterminate Erebus 9, they sent one final message: not to negotiate, but to declare the end. Humanity, your fate is sealed. This planet will be leveled. We do not accept your existence any longer. You have only one choice: die with honor or burn in the fire. In response, the Red Hand sent a message of their own, a drone ship, crashing straight into the Alliance command vessel, not carrying bombs, but something far worse: the bodies of their own special forces, killed over the past 2 weeks. Their corpses were gutted, carved with human words into their flesh. We don't need a choice. We are your death. Below, on Erebus 9, the real battle had only just begun. The Alliance, like any arrogant empire, believed that sheer strength could crush all resistance. As their invasion forces began their descent, they quickly realized they were walking into the hell humanity had prepared for them. Erebus 9's atmosphere was an invisible enemy. The electromagnetic storms were so intense that navigation systems failed. Radar was useless. Reconnaissance drones lost connection, and communications between units were completely cut off. The ground was a death trap. The first regiments to land were immediately caught in lethal ambushes, improvised thermobaric mines, artificial sinkholes, and tunnels leading straight into bottomless chasms. Everything was a trap. Caves that seemed like safe havens turned into mass graves. The petrified forests weren't shelter. They were sniper nests, where human marksmen waited to pick off invaders one by one. The Alliance deployed thousands of troops. Within 24 hours, a third of them were dead or missing. But the worst part, no one knew how they had died. There were no massive battles, No grand engagements. Only isolated squads cut off from command, vanishing one by one. The Alliance commanders began to panic. This was no longer a war, this was a hunt. Battles on Erebus. 9 never lasted long. They were swift ambushes, nightmares that ended in the blink of an eye. A 10-man patrol entered a canyon, when one soldier stumbled back. Out, alone, his mind was shattered. He muttered gibberish about red eyes in the dark. A platoon of armored troops moved across a field of stone. Without warning, the sky erupted in fire as improvised napalm bombs detonated, reducing them all to ash. An Alliance squad entered an abandoned outpost. Inside, they found their comrades tied to posts, their skin carved with trembling words. Run. Fear spread like wildfire. The greatest armies of the galaxy were now terrified of a few hundred humans left for dead on a dying world. And as fear took hold, they began making mistakes. The Alliance could not tolerate such humiliation. They made the ultimate decision, the complete annihilation of Erebus 9. Their warships opened fire. Plasma barges and nuclear hellfire rained down upon the planet, incinerating everything. Firestorms engulfed the landscape, caves collapsed, and fields of rock burned in the inferno. They thought they had won, but just as they believed Erebus 9 had gone silent forever, the real nightmare began. From the ashes of the planet, something rose. Not an army, not a lone survivor, but a legend. The Red Hand had not died. They had retreated deep underground, where the blast could not reach them. They had prepared for this. They hadn't just fought to survive, they had planned for vengeance. And as the Alliance ships prepared to depart, believing their mission was complete, their fleet began to explode. Human warriors had infiltrated their warships, spreading chaos from within. Control systems were hijacked, turrets turned inward, Alliance ships firing upon their own. Hull breaches were triggered, venting hundreds of soldiers into the void of space. Within an hour of believing they had triumphed, the Alliance fleet was torn apart from the inside. As the fires on Erebus 9 faded, a single rumor spread across the galaxy. The Red Hand cannot be destroyed. Erebus 9 was not a grave, it was where legends were born. And from this day forward, every enemy of humanity would live in fear. Because mankind never dies easily. The explosions continued, violent tremors ripping through the hardened rock of Erebus 9, fracturing the last remnants of standing structures. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burning flesh, mixed with the chaotic screams of Alliance soldiers trapped by the collapsing terrain. But in that hellscape, human warriors still fought exhausted, bleeding on the brink of death. No more advanced weaponry, no more protective armor. They had burned through everything but one thing, their will to fight, and that, above all else, was the most terrifying weapon of all. Alliance soldiers were terrified. They no longer saw ordinary enemies before them, they saw wraiths, demons wearing human skin, creatures that did not feel pain, did not retreat. An Alliance trooper stumbled on the rubble, his eyes darting wildly. He gasped as a shadow lunged at him from the darkness. A crude knife, fashioned from shattered armor plating, drove straight into his throat. The human soldier who delivered the strike smiled even as a plasma bolt tore through his chest a second later. He collapsed, but his fingers clenched the blade tighter, twisting it to ensure his enemy would not rise again. The remaining warriors of the Red Hand surged forward like rabid beasts, no longer fighting for survival, only to drag their enemies into hell with them. Alliance commanders watching from orbit could not comprehend what they were seeing. Why are they still fighting? Why weren't they surrendering? Why weren't they running, trying to save their own lives? This wasn't a battle. It was collective suicide. But no, this was a declaration. A declaration that humanity would never die easily. Deep beneath the surface, in a makeshift command post hidden within the tunnels, the last remnants of the Red Hand worked frantically. They were not fighting on the battlefield. They were fighting in the shadows with keyboards, machines, and lines of code. Is the signal ready? Uploading just a few more seconds. The ground above rumbled with the force of approaching explosions. A section of the wall collapsed, filling the room with dust and debris. A wounded soldier, partially buried, groaned and pulled himself up, blood streaming down his forehead. Hurry, we don't have much time. Done. A final keystroke. The transmission was sent a coded signal, broadcasting across every Alliance channel, reaching every ship, every relay station, every military command center. A simple message, sharper than any blade. Humanity never submits. And at that exact moment, the room was consumed in fire, obliterated by an explosion. But the signal continued. It would never stop. In the heart of the Alliance's command center, dozens of generals and high-ranking officials stood frozen, watching the message loop across their monitors. Their faces had gone pale. They had won. So why did this victory not feel like a victory? No one spoke. But in the silence, a creeping dread took root in their hearts. They had wiped out a battalion of human warriors, but they had not killed their spirit. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Because if humanity could do this while backed into a corner, what would happen when one day they had the numbers, the resources, and the technology to strike back? No one wanted to know the answer, but every single one of them understood one thing. That day would come. The space surrounding the mysterious ship remained unerringly silent. Not the silence of a drifting derelict, but the silence of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The observers at the Galactic Union's command center couldn't tear their eyes away from the screen. The ship, over 700 meters long, its surface scarred by what looked like hundreds of battles, emitted no signs of life. No communication signals. No engine activity. Yet, it was moving, slowly, deliberately, as if it knew that nothing could stop it. The emblem carved into its hull sent chills down the spines of those watching. A blood-stained hand. The silence stretched for mere seconds before the commander's voice rang out. Destroy it. Immediately, 3 of the Union's heavy warships sprang into action. They were monsters of war, each carrying enough firepower to raise a small planet. Plasma cannons hummed as they charged. Railguns spun up, accelerating armor-piercing rounds. Every weapon fired at once. Nothing in this galaxy could withstand such an assault. But just as the first salvo was about to hit, the ship vanished. Not exploded, not jumped to another dimension. It melted into the darkness. The Union warships barely had time to process what had happened. Sensors recalibrated, scanning every frequency. Nothing. Then, the lead warship was torn apart from within. No one saw the attacker. No alarms went off. Only screams echoed through the internal comms. The surveillance feeds displayed pure chaos. A squad of Union soldiers firing wildly into empty air before suddenly collapsing, their bodies slashed open by unseen blades. An officer attempting to send out a distress call, only for a shadowed hand to snatch him away before he could finish his sentence. Reinforced bulkheads buckling, as if something was moving inside them. 3 minutes later, the second warship erupted in flames. No one ever learned what had happened inside. The third warship, the last survivor, turned and fled. Every crew member knew that if they hesitated for even a second, they would never live to tell the tale. They left in utter panic, abandoning behind them a darkness no one dared to look into. News of the encounter was buried immediately. The Union's high command did not want anyone to know what had transpired. No reports were filed. No explanations were given. But rumors could not be stopped. The veterans, the survivors of Erebus, 9 understood what was happening. Humanity had returned. Where had they been? No one knew. How had they survived? No one was certain. Speculations ran rampant. Had a remnant of the Red Hand escaped Erebus 9 before its collapse? Had they found a new world hidden away where they rebuilt in secret? Or perhaps had they never truly died at all? Some whispered darker theories. Humanity is no longer human. Some claimed they had altered themselves with some forbidden technology. Others suggested they were no longer entirely alive, that they had become living nightmares. The disappearances of remote outposts only deepened the fear. No distress signals. No signs of battle. Only silence. When investigation teams were dispatched, all they found were blood-stained corridors, filled with the unmistakable traces of pure terror. Walls clawed apart, as if the people inside had desperately tried to dig through solid steel. Glass doors ripped open from the inside, despite being designed to withstand orbital bombardments. No survivors. On every wall of the abandoned outposts, a single phrase was etched into the metal cut with something impossibly sharp. We have returned. Panic swept through the Union. Emergency meetings were held. Fleets were mobilized. Defenses were reinforced. But the ones who had survived Erebus, 9 understood a simple truth. No wall could stop the wrath of humanity. No ship could outrun their vengeance. No army could hold the line against shadows that had crawled out of hell itself. Only one question haunted the minds of those who ruled the galaxy. Can we stop them before it's too late? And on a nameless ship, drifting in the void, an old soldier of the Red Hand smiled. Too late. There are moments in history when battles become legends. Erebus, 9 was one of them. The Galactic. Union had believed they had eradicated the Last Battalion. They had believed the dead world had been burned beyond recognition, that nothing could have survived the inferno they had unleashed. Yet, years later, on distant colonies and war fronts where humanity still fought, the whispers began. Union soldiers spoke of nightmares of armored phantoms, of warriors who knew no fear, of enemies who should have died long ago but still hunted them in the shadows. Erebus, 9 was no longer just a ruined planet. It had become a symbol, a warning, a legacy. The Union may have won the battle, but they had not won the war. They had awakened something that no empire, no fleet, no civilization in the galaxy should have ever dared to awaken. The unbreakable will of humanity. And as long as humanity existed, they would fight. Not for revenge, not for conquest, but because they were human, and humans never back down. The story of the Last Battalion is not over. It has only just begun,